Hello and welcome to Tribune's Shelf Life. It's a show where we welcome authors and much more. And I'm very excited to welcome artist, activist, and writer T.M Krishna to the show with his new book, We the People of India, Decoding a Nation's Symbol. It's a pleasure to have you. So welcome to Shelf
Thank you
Life.
very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I wanted to start straight off. I mean, I think it's an incredible book, and as we were talking before, I think it's you sort of go into into our symbols and sort of looking at all the debates that surround them. But I'm going to start off with straight off the one which is the most controversial, or generating the most controversial, is this thing idea about the national song and the national anthem. And you've talked passionately about the national anthem and how it moves, and there is this certain feeling. But then there is this aspect of the national song. And can you, in many ways, you think that it represents, at least some part of it represents a different idea of India. The first two verses, of course, not maybe. But can you really talk about, whether there should be a controversy between the national song and the national anthem, and how do you sort of see one being played against the other? How do you think that sort of, how do you think that plays out with a composite idea of India?
Okay. First of all, thank you for having me, Mandira. Pleasure to be here. Okay. The national song requires multiple decoupling and some re-understandings. First of all, the expression national song was not used in the Constituent Assembly by Rajendra Prasad when he declared Jana Gana Mana as national anthem. He said Vande Mataram will be equally honored and respected. So it's very important. I'm paraphrasing, that's all he said. In the Constituent Assembly legislative, which is Constituent Assembly played two roles. One part was creating the constitution, and it also did every day's work, the legislative. And in the legislative, few years before Jana Gana Mana was chosen, it is actually the person that the present establishment loves to constantly criticize, which is Jawaharlal Nehru, who actually called it the national song. So I think that should go on record, as Nehru is the person who actually in the legislative of called the national song. Vande Mataram has, I can say, many lives. Okay?
Okay.
Its first life consisted of what I call two verses. There's also some confusion with the government's present out. They call it six verses. All scholars and I don't agree. It's a song of four verses, if I can be specific. Aurobindo is also translated in that manner. The first two verses, which is Vande Mataram, up to Subrat Jyotsna end, and second verse, which is Sapta Koti Kanta Kanta. These two verses were written together between 1872 and 1875. At that point of time, Bankim was not writing Anandamath. So this is one life. Okay?
Yeah.
This part of the song, the first verse, is descriptive, quite mellow, quite pleasant, uses the sa and sha syllables, and it's quite beautiful, honestly. The second verse, there is a bit of a shift lyrically and structurally. Suddenly you have a kind of a resistance call for resistance, So there is a kind of a shift, which is also reflects in the structure. Now, this is the first two verses. Then, at some point, Bankim starts writing Anandamath and then extend the song and adds two more verses to the song. Now, once this is the second life of the song, okay?
Yeah.
This life of the song is problematic. Let's be very clear, for two reasons. These two verses change the tone and the context of the song entirely. Suddenly, the song is very clearly a description of Durga, the goddess. She is the giver of wealth, etc., etc. So it's completely religiously focused, definitely. Now, why did this happen to the song? This happened to the song because Bankim gave it a very important role in the text Anandamath. Anandamath is a complex text. It is a problematic text because in the text, the Hindu sannyasins who are up against Mir Jafar, the ruler, are not only attacking the establishment, they are attacking Muslim villages. They are attacking pillaging places. They are actually saying things which are quite Islamophobic and anti-Muslim. So this life, suddenly the entire songs, first two verses included, becomes part of Anandamath. Now the song gets a very different tone, very different meaning, right? Then you also have 1905, 1906, when the same song is playing a role in anti-partition struggles in Bengal.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there is now another life for the song.
Yeah.
Now, but even then, as I've said in the book, Harivansh Rai Bachchan talks about a time when, even during that time, Muslims were uncomfortable with the song and what it said. Then 37, there is the entire problem with the song, with what the Muslim League thought was the flag, which is a Congress flag. Also, whether Urdu was also being some way removed from public education, etc. So it's a complex set of things. But I have to say, the moment the song became part of Anandamath, it reflected a different ethos, different imagination of India. We cannot run away from this. This is just very factual. It is there in it. It is for everybody to read Anandamath if they want to. And Anandamath is not really anti-colonial also. Let's also say that, because it ends in a very, very unusual manner. So, in this context, it is a different imagination of India that developed through about 3 or 4 decades in these different movements around the song and what it represented, etc. But it also had a certain nationalistic fervor because it had a role, which
Yeah.
is why I think it is quite spectacular that in 1937, when the controversy broke, it was not, while the Muslim League wanted the entire song thrown out and said can't be there, they come to a settlement. Nehru, Azad, Gandhi, Tagore, everybody, Bose, they're all involved in this conversation. They said the first 2 verses should not bother anybody. We will retain that, but we respect the problem of the song being in a text and also the other 2 verses. I think this is a very mature, and the intention is to bring together a country which was very close to getting independence, a decade or so
Yeah.
away. Now, Jana Gana Mana, its entire birth is entirely different. Jana Gana Mana is born when somebody has the gall to ask Rabindranath Tagore to write a song in praise of King George V.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
have this Tagore saying, I mean, honestly, if I was going to paraphrase in colloquial terms, he's like, are you mad? I mean, how can you even expect me to do something like this? Then he comes out with this lyrical just beauty. Okay? It's a song that describes the individual, the collective, the hearts and minds of the people, the geography of the land, the kind of people living on this land, and also the emotional landscape of the land. It's also a song that's describing a state where there's sadness and darkness. It's also a song of hope which says the sun will rise behind the hills, the eastern hills.
Yeah.
You can clearly see these are very different songs. Jana Gana Mana is a song of dignity of the collective and the larger collective. It's a song that describes every kind of person on this land. So it is two imaginations. You have to say, I like to say that Jana Gana Mana is the preamble to the preamble of the Indian Constitution, if I can
That's a
put it
nice way
that
to
way.
put it. Yes, that's a nice way to put it.
It is, because even before the preamble was imagined, he's given you the preamble. He's given you everything in it. So there are two imaginations and they are contesting each other. But it's not new contestation. Let's also remember that. This contestation has always been there. This contestation of, are we a majoritarian Hindu land or are we a secular, open, welcoming land? And I want to say one thing about Jana Gana Mana. There's been this controversy but also this word Sindh.
Yeah.
It went to the court and somebody said, I think Sindh is the most valuable word in the description. I've said it in the book. It's about all those people who may not be citizens of this country, but this land welcomes.
Yeah.
And we have always done that. Whether it's the Tibetans, whether it's the Rohingyas, whether it is the Manis who live in Karnataka, who came from Africa, this is a land that truly people could come and make themselves comfortable in. So I think Jana Gana Mana is probably the most ideal anthem. And structurally, I've spoken about it. The fact that Vande Mataram had different intentions at different times shows in its structural jerkiness. Jana Gana Mana very clearly was a composite idea that came about compositely, which is why structurally it's absolutely exquisite.
It's exclusive and inclusive, right? We're looking at whether we look whether
Absolutely. Yes, it is.
And,
I simply put, that's true.
yes. And I think that one of the aspects, and we've talked at length about this, about the how the song and the problematic and the problematic, how problematic it was. And you said, at some point of time that there was, even in the book, you talk about the debates that go around each national symbol, right?
Yes.
Whether it is the flag, whether it is, Satyameva Jayate, which you have talked about at great length, and you've talked about truth, and whether the way the sort of adoption of it was actually true. What does truth mean? I mean, you also talk about great deep of debate, and you talk about Gandhi and Tagore, and you look at the two different versions of I want to ask you as to, when we are looking at the national symbols, and at a point of time when national symbols and respect talks about loyalty, and it's very much like a social media post where it's either yes or no. Are you loyal or not? It's a multiple choice answer, right? When
True. There is
in many,
not there is not even the third choice in that.
right. So it is either yes or no, right? So in this, you talk about, you're trying to say, but this is not a multiple choice answer. This is an essay. This is like an ICSE exam versus a CBSE exam in many ways, right? So can you talk about the fact that there is this debate that we kind of miss, and what the book actually really chooses to do is to tell you that there has been conversations around it. It hasn't just been one person's idea.
Exactly. I mean, I think it's important that you ask this question, especially after we discuss what seems to be a two-song debate, because there were so many discussions, so many disagreements, and so many pulls and pushes for every one of these symbols. Now, what does it say? We also have this two words we use, right? Right, left today, in today's
Yeah.
parlance. It's the most absurd way to describe people's minds, thoughts, positions. I believe all of us are floaters. We float across these various realms that we have categorized. In the past, it was this fluidity, I think, was far more easily accepted. And people were, you could be conservative in something, you could be completely different, and this was fine. That's what human beings are. These debates really show you that.
Yeah.
And also we use Nehru, Gandhi, all these people together. Nehru and Gandhi are having huge arguments and
Yeah.
disagreements.
Yeah.
Tagore and Gandhi don't agree for 5 years on the fundamental idea of the charkha, which was
Yeah.
Gandhi's soul. And Tagore
Yeah.
literally goes at him, if I can
Yeah.
just
Yeah. I
say
mean,
it colloquially.
I mean, I've been reading the bit where he says this, when he says that, if there is and if I'm going to quote, where he says that in dumb terror of some master's bludgeon, or blind acceptance of some guru's injunction, if you accept something, then there is a need to, and you squash rebellion. There is a need to mourn, and you've lost hope. It's high time to mourn, and I just think
Absolutely. And he
that
said,
is incredible.
he's telling the conservative liberal, huh, by the way.
Yeah,
Gandhi is the conservative liberal, if you can
yeah,
put
yeah,
that. So
yes,
he's really telling. So I think this is, for me, honestly, even when you quote it, when I think about it, this gives me goosebumps. The
yes,
fact that there was so much thought into every little thing. And these symbols were not arbitrary things. They realized that they were creating something that would emotionally and aesthetically and internationally represent this country. So every moment and every idea was important. In this, they contested each other. They said, which would be a better choice? There were other choices, there were colors, they were looking at different communities were coming and demanding. Sikhs were saying, we are not being represented in the
yeah,
flag. Now,
yeah,
and even in the Constituent Assembly, when each member speaks about the flag, you can see that they have their own imagination of how they see themselves in this land and how they associate with this image. This entire thing was allowed to play constantly. I think one thing that united every one of these people is the fact that the intention and the integrity with which they engaged in these debates, they engaged in finally saying, okay, we'll come to some kind of an adjustment. I may not agree with you, but that's okay, but I get where you're coming from, is a huge lesson for us. Because in the WhatsApp university, in the little ways that we are having discussions today, it's impossible to have this discussion. It's impossible even to listen. So I think the fact that, building this nation or even creating a constitution or this emblem was in fact about multiple disagreements rather than many agreements. There were multiple disagreements, right? And I think that's a huge thing for us to learn from. And stop boxing people into just one position. Allow them to have multiple positions and allow this contestation to happen in a manner that's respectful and that you listen to the other side. The few things that none of them, I think, gave up on was empathy, was justice, was equality, was being welcoming to not just human beings, but everything, the animal world, everything, right? So this nature, I think, is something that I marvel at every time I read any of these people and their quotes and their debates. I just marvel at the way they've engaged with each other. Even, I mean, I would even say Ambedkar and Gandhi. I mean, they were like literally at two opposite points. And Ambedkar and both of, I mean, I said really, really hard things on Gandhi. But why were they doing it? You know, let's talk about that. They were both very, very strong on.
Yeah, I mean, I also wanted to ask you, in one of this is also, of course, these big debates that are having across with the, let's say the stalwarts of thought of that time. But there's also a certain engagement of citizenry. So, whether it's Pingali, yes, who he talks about whose mission it is to get the flag, or when Satyameva Jayate is brought in, there are people, you say in the National Archives there's this huge sort of file about everybody saying, but this is grammatically incorrect, this is not okay, and where does this come from? But there is a sort of conversation that ordinary people are having with the people of the time,
with the Prime Minister at time, with the Prime Minister.
Yes. Right? So my question is, I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask you, can we reclaim that? Do you think that, I mean, how do you sort of use that space? And what the message of the book for me is the fact that everybody's involved in this idea of democracy. And at some point of time, you talk about numbness and our sort of complicitness in when it comes to, let's say, the death penalty. We may not have signed off, but we're complicit in this. But there's a certain apathy about connection. And can you talk about how we can use in a social media world, can we reclaim these symbols to mean more conversation?
I mean, it's very, very important because, even when I read those letters written by these citizens to the Prime Minister saying, you got Satyameva Jayate wrong, it should be Satyameva Jayate, I was like, how many people are writing into these offices, to the Home Ministry? It's crazy. Yeah, I think even to the President. But the fact that it mattered, I think that's where it starts. Why did that matter? Why did it matter so much? Why was Pingali on this mission and making 28 designs of flags and showing it to everybody saying, we need a flag? In many citizens, in everyday people. And I will also include the bureaucrats in this, because often we don't see bureaucrats engaging in these little discussions with great intention. Here you have bureaucrats debating within themselves, So I think what it really showed was two things. One is what we have done, unfortunately. I think we have reduced democracy to voting. I think we have reduced our participation to that one day when the vote dal do. And for that you have a campaign. I think, why don't we have a campaign through the year asking people to participate in democracy? As if my job is only to vote for my state or for the parliamentary elections. We have reduced it. So every citizen has become cynical also about their participation. Even in schools and in colleges, we teach participation as vote. But the fact is, you're a participatory democracy. For this, two things are required. You have to make every citizen feel passionate about this diverse, incredible land, beyond all structures and boundaries. This, I don't think the executive or the judiciary has done well enough. And I'll include both of them in this. They've scared citizens about participation. You're always told about the limits of your participation. The difficulty, for example, citizens have in organizing a protest. Let's take that today. The permissions are made difficult. Anything you want to do in public space is difficult. Now, if you from that side are so resistant, and if the judiciary constantly says, yes, you have all these rights, but you know, and if every time I'm going to say something, I'm worried somebody's going to throw a defamation case on me. I mean, the structure is, first of all, not conducive to me participating. One, the culture of participation has also not been developed, whether it's our school system, our home. In our home, what are we talking about? So, therefore, you don't have a culture of participation, neither a structural support to participation. In this environment, the cynicism is even greater because everybody is either saying, I'll just take care of making my money and going ahead, or you get more and more parochial. And that happens faster because you're saying, I have only so much, somebody else is going to take something away from me. It could be because of caste, it could be gender, it could be religion, it could be anything. So you actually, in a way, create an environment of being non-participatory and more parochial and more narrow-minded, rather than saying, this is your place as much as mine. We are equal. Let us both participate in this debate and let's create platforms to do so. Now, you can say Panchayati Raj. I mean, just look at how our panchayats function. Technically, that there should be support systems for this participation. Are they? No. They are completely dominated by caste powerful people or by men. This is what has happened. So the problem is in the culture of democracy. We have not done enough to cultivate a culture of democracy. At that point of time, there was this great imagination of this culture. And I also think the freedom struggle, because it was a participatory exercise, in which in a way was participatory democracy, if you want to use that term there, allowed people to be active, allowed people to push back, allowed people to not be afraid in some ways, which we lost. Instead, we became a very crusty set of people who are limiting ourselves further and further to very, very narrow pathways.
There's this aspect of, you said, as art, where art is really a measure of how of freedom, as well as how strong you are of different ideas. And I think you've talked really about that. But I also wanted to ask you, how, when you looked at all these symbols and you did all this research, how has that changed your relationship with these symbols that define us?
I would consider myself the last person to be actually researching or looking into, within quotes, national symbols. Because I'm not a person who is like, who thinks of, India, Indians, ourselves, I'm not, and maybe that's the artistic side of me, maybe that's the musician in me, it could be, I don't know. But I think that's changed. In the sense is, when you go back in the past and you listen to these arguments and listen to these discussions, what you realize is that there is a certain necessity for identification of a certain land and building. I'm not going to do the philosophical debates of nation state, etc., keeping that aside, but a necessity to create an ambience, if I can. And I think these symbols create an ambience of a certain cultural coming together of, and in India's case, of a country that was so diverse, with people who, 30 kilometers away from where I am right now is a different language. Within the places that people having different food and culture. How does one knit these sets of people together? And that's one thing I started respecting. Much more I understood that. Two, the fact that even the symbols need not be some kind of an obedience call. The problem is that I think from childhood, we think of them as like an obedience call. National anthem, stand up. Read the preamble and write it in your civics exam. Or, you know that something else about the flag, right? So they were more, you think of them some kind of rules and regulations that are put together that you have to be obedient and respectful and revere. This actually made me love them, made me really engage with them as something that they are diverse in their meanings, they are diverse in the way people understand them. But I started having an association which is not within quotes, a nationalistic association. But I found reason to talk with them, reason to listen to these symbols, reason to feel passionate about them, reason to feel deeply that they are not some dominant creatures, if I can say that are there to oppress us and say, you are Indian, this is your passport. No, but to say, this is to say that these are the values that we would like all of us to share. These are the ethics with which we should coexist, and within which exists every word we have in the preamble: justice, equality, fraternity, and I will add compassion, and I will add all these words. So I think it did rewire my own relationship with these symbols, and I wouldn't have expected that.
I think one of the aspects about the book is really about doubt, and I think how we navigate it and we sort of hold space for the other, which I think is an important part
Yeah,
of anything, of civilization versus democracy. And so, thank you so much. Thank you for being part of Shelf Life,
absolutely.
and thank you for the book.
No, thank you very much.